Good afternoon, eighth grade, geography students. I am late today and I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to go ahead and get a video done. We had a teachers meeting that held me up for a while, but that's not your fault, that's mine. I'm sorry that this is getting on here so late, but you'll still have 2 days to get this work done. We need to look today at a region of Central Africa called, let me get back to my title here, the Lower Guinea Coast. And the reason I'm backed up to this map is that I wanted to show you a couple things before I get to the slide I want to start with. First of all, notice the size of the nations we talked about yesterday. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is here in the south. It's very large. And then the Republic of the Congo beside it, not as large. Okay, those are the two that have capitals right opposite each other on the river. Then we also talked about the Central African Republic. Today we're going to look at the countries of Gabon, and then this little bitty square up here, Equatorial Guinea, has a piece here and then a piece up here. It has two different parts. And Cameroon here. Notice this, Cameroon has this long sliver that goes up here, kind of odd shaped. So those are the three countries on the mainland that we're going to look at, and then the island of Sao Tome. Forgot to start my timer again. Okay, one other thing I wanted to remind you of from yesterday is looking at this chart of the facts of the nations of Central Africa. Look at these ages of lifespan. They're very short. Many of these countries, the people are lucky to live past the age of 50 to 60. AIDS has a lot to do with that, and we've talked about that and how that has affected the nation and the continent as a whole. But there are many other factors, of course, malaria and other diseases like we talked about the other day. So just a very, very poor area of the country. Remember that tomorrow we have a guest speaker, and I hope you all will be able to join us. Kosi's mom is going to tell us about growing up in Nigeria. I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope you will all be able to come join us. That is at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, so let's talk about the Lower Guinea Coast. We're going to start with just a couple little things here about it, and then we'll talk about the four different countries. This is an area west of the Congo Basin, and it is 3 countries, and then on the mainland, and then an island nation. Okay. Gabon is the first one. Gabon received their independence from France. Many of these countries in this region did, so that is, we're going to talk about one today that's not French, but we'll get to that in a minute. It was part of French Equatorial Africa, which was a larger country that was then divided into smaller ones. It became the Republic of the Congo, Central African Republic, Chad, and Gabon, 4 different countries. We have not yet talked about the country of Chad. One of the major things that Gabon exports is timber. They have a good supply of ebony and mahogany, which are expensive woods. If you have furniture in your home made from ebony or mahogany, it was probably pretty expensive, and your parents probably guard that furniture very carefully. These are important products in many parts of the world. The population in these areas is predominantly Bantu tribes. They do have some pygmies, which we talked a little bit, I think, about that the other day. Pygmies are a different tribe in Africa. They typically only grow to be about 4.5 feet tall. It gives you an idea that I'm 5'2", so they're probably a good 8 inches shorter than me, rising only probably to about my shoulders, okay, at their tallest. So that is an interesting group of people there. And there's scientists have wanted to study them for ages to try to figure out why they don't grow any taller, but that is just the way the pygmy tribal group is. Okay, most of Gabon is rainforest. About 90% of the land in Gabon is rainforest. Only 1% of the land is arable or good for farming. So they don't have a lot of space where they can actually grow products because rainforest is not a good idea. Okay. They do grow a lot in these areas. They grow a lot of coffee. They grow, plantains, yams, other things like that, but not a lot of room for agricultural products. Equatorial Guinea is another one of these countries. It's a very small, it is several islands and a small bit on the mainland. They gained their independence somewhere around 1968. This is the one country, sub-Saharan Africa, that speaks Spanish as their official language because they gained their independence from Spain. Portugal originally settled it, but Spain, they gave it to Spain for some reason, and it's back in history, and we don't need to know why. Spain gained control in the mid-19th century, and therefore Spanish is the national language of Equatorial Guinea. This is an interesting country. Whoops, let me go back here. Because they actually found oil here in 1997, but the country is so poor, and they have so many problems. They found oil in 1997, and you would think that would mean that the country has it pretty good, and they're going to do well. Well, the president and his friends are the only ones who benefit from the oil industry. Everybody else has to fend for themselves. 22% of the country is unemployed, which is a very high number. You think that's about 1 in every 4 people are unemployed. Most of them, though, work in industry, which is odd because in most third world countries, you don't have that high of a percentage of the population that works in industry. But here in Equatorial Guinea, they do. They do things like fishing, mining, livestock, timber. They produce gold, bauxite, diamonds, and tantalum, whatever that is. But they do also have quite a few agricultural products as well. All right, third country, Cameroon. Cameroon was at one point ruled by the British and the French separately. They each had had a separate colony, and then when the French gave them their independence in 1960, the following year the British gave their independence, and then the two sides united and formed one nation. They went through a couple different name changes, but eventually settled on just Cameroon. French is the official language of Cameroon because most of the country was French, but there are 279 different African languages spoken in the country. That is enormous amount of languages. I had a student years ago before I was teaching, actually, when I was working, who is now a missionary in Cameroon. It's very, very difficult missionary place to spread the gospel because the Muslims have taken over have gotten quite a stronghold there. But there is the gospel going out in Cameroon. They speak several different Bantu languages. Bantu, look at this little girl, isn't she sweet? Bantu is a subgroup of the Niger-Congo family of languages. Most of you, I think, realize now that we can boil all the languages in the world down to about 4 or 5 that we started with, and the Niger-Congo family is one of those. We know that the Romance languages, that would be Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, and all can be boiled back down to Latin. They all came out of that. English is actually from the Germanic languages, so we can, while they've all spread out and done, developed into way different languages, they can be boiled back down to see that they all had a common starting point. And we know that happened at the Tower of Babel. Okay, Cameroon, other things I wanted to tell you about Cameroon is they do have some oil reserves as well. So there's a possibility that they could develop those and produce those. In Cameroon is the village of Debuncha. It is one of the wettest places on the planet. I thought you could appreciate this. 400 plus inches of rain a year. And we think we have it bad when we get more than 60. They have 6 times what we do in rain every year. So a very, very wet place. Let's talk about Sao Tome and Principe. These are islands off the coast of northern Gabon. They were Portuguese colonies settled by the Portuguese around 1500, 1470, 1500, somewhere in there. And they were held by the Portuguese all the way until 1975. So for almost 500 years, they were controlled by the Portuguese. And now they have their independence. These countries have one country, separate islands. They're volcanic islands, so the soil is fairly rich and can grow about whatever they want. But they have rich diversity of culture here. They have some very, very rich areas and some very poor areas. And you have pictures of that in your book on page 502. So they have a tourist area where people want to go there and spend money, and it's wealthy and it looks great. And then they have areas where it's not so great. It is predominantly a secular nation, but they do guarantee religious freedom. And as I said, the 2 islands and maybe a half dozen littler islands, so they're all volcanic. So they have decent soil. It's not like they're coral islands. Coral islands tend to have very poor soil, where volcanic islands tend to have rich soil. They have a lot of fishing on these islands, so fishing is a big industry. They started off as islands for sugarcane and slavery, and now those have both gone away, thankfully. And so they don't use those as their industry anymore. They're fishing, they're agriculture. They have coconuts, bananas, yams, cocoa, coffee, all the usual things that we see in this area of the globe, right there around the equator, where we have that warm and moist climate. Okay, so we are finished with Central Africa, and tomorrow we'll move into Western Africa. But tomorrow we're going to take the day off to talk to Mrs. Eke about what life was like in Nigeria. So please, please don't miss that. We look forward to having her with us, and I'm eager to hear what she has to say. She has been a lot of places and done a lot of interesting things. So be ready to ask questions and participate. And then next week, we will have Golda's mom and dad tell us about what life is like in Togo. And I'm also very interested to hear what they have to say. So it's going to be a really fun chapter, I hope, for us. But remember to keep practicing your countries. Okay? Do not forget to practice your countries. This part of the map can get very, very confusing. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.